All right, so we're here today, our Friday sit down with Mr. Elliot Kalb. How you doing?
I'm terrific, thank you.
And my name is Michael Antonellis. And Mr. Kalb, so you are a UMass alum. You are a senior editorial producer at the MLB Network. So we're going to probably just start back at your UMass days. Can you tell me what your time here at UMass was like?
It really helped me in so many ways, personally, professionally. I got a chance to do a lot of different things. I worked at WMUA. I lived at Marston Hall. That's where the radio station was in those days. I announced the football games. I announced the women's basketball games. I did a sports talk show. I also was worked on the Collegian. Had a column my last year for the Daily Collegian, and I enjoyed the sports writing. I love the journalism and the communications departments here, and I find that it really helped me in my professional career. I have nothing but good to say about my experience at the University of Massachusetts.
So from my understanding, there wasn't specifically like a journalism major, or that you So you participated in something that we don't know now, but it's mass communications, correct?
Right. I got a broad history of mass communications, a history of journalism, but I was around good people. One of my professors hired me to do research for a book he was writing on Dave Winfield, who was then playing for the New York Yankees, now a Hall of Famer. I still remember some of the classes I took in the journalism department. Some of the professors, Ralph Whitehead, who recently retired, I understand, and Julius Lester, who taught me about the civil rights movement. And I just had, again, a great experience.
And what were some of the things that led up to your acquisition of a job with the MLB after UMass? Were there things at UMass that led you to that direction, whether it be like a sports column or something like that?
Well, I did an internship in New York City at NBC Sports my junior year, the fall semester. And it came about because I wrote away to places. I wrote away to the 9 media entities I thought I might want to work for after graduation. I had no contacts in the industry or anything, and only one of them responded. Thankfully, it was NBC. and I wound up from the internship there getting a job on weekends as a logger on their weekend sports report show. And I knew sports fairly well, and I got along with people, and all of a sudden I became a statistician for within a couple of years on the Major League Baseball Game of the Week with Vin Scully and Joe Garagiola. They were flying me around the country, and that thrill of seeing ball games live has never left me. Next week for MLB Network, I'm working with Bob Costas. We're going to be not too far from here at Fenway Park. The Cubs at Red Sox on Thursday, and we stay for the Yankees at Red Sox on Friday. Still, after all these years, where would I rather be? Probably no place. You know, I was in LA, I was just telling you, for the World Baseball Classic in March, which was an Olympian type of experience. So to handle the research for that whole tournament, and it just is still in my blood, and I still love it. So yeah, the things that I learned at UMass have helped me throughout.
And you discussed your work with stats, and in baseball now we know that stats is such a big, important part of the game. Can you just talk about the kind of rapid fire movement between, say, a statistician and someone on air?
Well, they call me Mr. Stats, and I made my
Twitter,
living.
Mr. Stats 50.
I made my living as a statistician, but I can't even balance a checkbook. I mean, I'm not very good with numbers outside of baseball and football and basketball. I prefer to call myself a storyteller. Mm-hmm. And when I do research, when I work with announcers on a live sporting event, or put together a research packet for MLB Network for the use of 17 hours a day of live programming, I'm a storyteller. Sometimes I tell stories with numbers. Sometimes it's through interviewing athletes. Sometimes it's just adding perspective. I've written books ranking great players in different sports, and I've always said I'm more of a storyteller than a statistician. Not that I bristle at statistician, it's led to so much, but it's just putting things in perspective. So whether it's new age analytic numbers or traditional numbers, I try to be inclusive and bring as many people into the conversation. So I try to tell a story the simplest way. So I'll tell an announcer, the best way that most people can handle and understand the information.
And how do you feel with the new, I guess you call them analytical stats, the WAR, the FIP, stats like that? How do you feel they impact the game and impact the casual viewer?
I think it brings more people into the game. There's so many people involved in fantasy sports. There's so many people involved. Anything that helps bring fans into the game more and have a deeper understanding, I'm in favor of. Some of the stats, I'm a bigger fan than others. But if it can help lend perspective, if it can tell a story that otherwise wouldn't be told, I'm generally in favor of it. I'll do a deep dive and have a real understanding of what I need to, and use what I can. But I'm still a fan of the traditional stats as well.
And we just talk about your day-to-day life at the MLB Network. You said earlier that you're up in the office at 6 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes you're there all day, all night. So we just talk about your day-to-day life.
Well, not all night, but I come home and I still watch baseball games, which is bizarre after 12 hours of looking at baseball and studying about baseball, but it's what I love to do. We put together, my staff and I, a 20-page packet of information that could be used on all of our shows. And we have shows that are analytic in nature, like MLB Now with Brian Kenny. We have shows that are more intentional talk with Kevin Millar and Chris Rosa that aren't analytic at all, more, pop culture type shows. We have a morning show. We have MLB Tonight, which is our Emmy Award-winning signature show where we have live look-ins and go bouncing around from game to game. And this information that we spend our time at 6, 7 a.m. in the morning writing has to live for the next 12, 15 hours. So it's a challenging task, but we do it. And then I'm in the control room on, usually High Heat with Christopher Russo, a show that I go on once a week, doing trivia or other such nonsense. And just adding to that show. Every show has production meetings. Every show needs research. And we'll have researchers in the control room that could talk to the talent. So if they say something wrong, if the researcher can add any information, or if in a commercial any of the announcers need some information last second, we have a researcher who can talk to him in the control room.
And are there some on-air talents, I don't know how closely you specifically get to work with them, but are there some who kind of rely on stats to drive a point home, or are there some that need a little more help from you, like understanding a statistic or getting something across that way?
Oh, sure. First of all, any announcer who says he doesn't use stats is lying. They say they don't rely on stats, but they all use them. No matter what you see, they all use them. So they might as well use the most pertinent, the most relevant, the best ones. And if they don't understand, and my researchers won't put in, and I won't write, you write for your talent. So I'm not going to write things for Harold Reynolds that he won't use or is not comfortable using. So there won't be a lot of FIP and WAR and everything. And the other thing I say is that no matter what these sabermetricians and these analytics experts say, and I listen to them, and I learn more from these former players than they'll ever learn from me. I'm always asking them questions. I asked Ryan Dempster, I caught him the other day, and I said, how is CC Sabathia, after a lifetime of pitching, after 40,000 regular season pitches, after it looked like he was through 2 years ago and 3 years ago, how is he pitching so effectively? I'll ask Harold Reynolds questions, and to have them it's a two-way street. It's a push-pull system. I'll push information to them, and I'll pull information from them, and I think that's a great way of handling it. But we write for our talent, so we're not going to give them anything they're not comfortable with. We'll certainly explain it to them. I explained to Al Leiter what all these things mean, what OPS plus is, and then hopefully he'll use it sparingly or when it's relevant. And
do you feel like with the combination of who some people call the nerds, the sabermetricians, and the kind of the players who have experienced the game, have been in the game, and when they clash in terms of analyzing a player or analyzing a game, how do you feel like that impacts the coverage of the game?
There's a mix and it's a blend, and the best ones And John Smoltz is about one of the best ones. He's the best analyst in TV, and he draws the assignment of covering the World Series with Joe Buck, and he covers our games with Bob Costas for MLB Network, and he works MLB Tonight. And Smoltz combines the two. He takes certain analytics and saber, but he's also so traditionally old school. And to have people like that at our disposal who know what it's like to pitch 200 innings a year, to start, to close. So I don't think there's a real clash. I think there may have been, and we're past that point, maybe 3-4 years ago. But I think, and we see it with the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series. As much as they were sabermetric oriented, they realized that there is a value. They shouldn't be putting down the old world scouting. They shouldn't be putting down the concept of teamwork and players who fit in. They hired Joe Madden, who is as much of a people person, and they had traditional. It's a blend, and so we see it with the major league teams. We see it with the announcers. We see it with the coverage. You need both.
And you were discussing your World Baseball Classic coverage earlier. Do you feel like the players that play in the World Baseball Classic are taking a risk by starting their season a little early with the before the regular season, or say during spring training? Or do you feel like it's just something that we should celebrate kind of as a world, that we can all come together and play baseball together?
I think we should celebrate it. I think it's there's nothing more tedious or boring to me than spring training baseball games, because you're not playing to win. What I tell people is that I'm also an NFL fan. I've worked in the NFL for 30 years, mostly for NBC Sports. And when Bill Belichick has a chance at the end of the season, or Tom Coughlin with the Giants, to rest players because you can rest them for the playoffs, and these coaches play them, Belichick's response is, they're competitors. This is what they do. People can get hurt they can get hurt in spring training, and indeed, we had Ian Desmond get hurt, the first baseman for the Rockies, in spring training without going to a World Baseball Classic roster. There are guys who are going to play in the World Baseball Classic and get hurt. There are going to be guys who go to the World Baseball Classic and don't get hurt. It's, you can always point to examples. Daniel Murphy went to the World Baseball Classic and didn't play a lot. The manager, Jim Leland, played second baseman. He was more familiar with Ian Kinsler, and people in Washington were worried that Daniel Murphy wasn't going to have his swing at the beginning of the year because he didn't get many at-bats. He wasn't in spring training. He didn't play in the World Baseball Classic. So what does he do? He starts hitting 400-500 in the first 3-4 weeks of the season. So there's no conclusive evidence. With the pitchers, I understand the reluctance. They want to pack these left arms in ice, not have them do anything more than pitch regular season games when you're paying pitchers $25 million a year, like Zach Greinke and Clayton Kershaw and Madison Bumgarner. You're probably not going to want to see them pitch in the World Baseball Classic. I get it, but outside of the pitchers, I think everybody, the Mike Trouts of the world, come on down. They should participate. It's only once every couple of years, and it's been a great experience for the players and for those of us who cover it. And
you mentioned Madison Bumgarner and some of the other big name pitchers who pitch in the National League. What's your stance on the National League pitchers still hitting and there's having no DH?
I enjoy it. There was much more of a difference when I was growing up between the National League and the American League. The umpires were different. They had league commissioners. There was different strike zones even for these two leagues, and there was no interleague play. So you would never see a Mets pitcher pitching to a Yankee batter. You'd never see an Angels pitcher pitching to a Dodger batter. And I get that they need, for attendance reasons and for marketing reasons, they wanted one baseball. They wanted interleague play. And now you have interleague play every day because they're uneven amount of teams. But I do like the differences in the leagues, and if that means the only discernible difference is the designated hitter rule, I'm in favor of it. I like having different strategies. I like having different strategies for different leagues. And when you see Madison Bumgarner hit a couple of home runs in one game,
the first game,
there's a great value to that.
And we're just talking about designated hitters. One of my favorite designated hitters of all time, David Ortiz, kind of had a statistical anomaly of a season, his final season. Is there any way to quantify what he did, or kind of explain through statistics what he did, or is that something we just see every once in a while from an all-time great hitter.
Well, he is one of the all-time great hitters, and we spent a lot of time last year at MLB Network on these different shows, putting it in perspective. Where does this rank among the great final seasons of someone's career, or at that age, or his career as a designated hitter, or his legacy in the game, or his place in history? And that's the fun of what we do, and that's the stories, some of the stories that we tell.
And let's see. I had another question, I guess, about your UMass time in general. Do you feel like UMass, you had an advantage here at UMass being kind of the only big school around here with a communications department and having the ability to cover things like the UMass baseball team or the Amherst baseball team? Did you find that was good for you?
I find, I was only stifled by my own creativity. I was the sports director at WMUA, and there was one football season, and it was 1AA at the time, not Division One.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know if they have 1AA anymore. It was a classification. It's called something else.
Yeah, the
FCS
or something.
They went into the final weekend of the football season where UMass needed a victory, and New Hampshire lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we employed was we had a student. We were covering the UMass game, which was a home game. We sent a student from the WMUA to the UNH game, and he had a phone call. He used a payphone to call the radio station, and they were able to patch, and we were able to get live updates, or not, even if it wasn't live, they would tape it, record it in the studio, and tell me to go to it from the play-by-play, and it was sort of like a quasi-professional type of operation.
That's awesome.
Because I knew UMass fans were not only interested in the UMass game, but the results of the UNH game. So all that helped. It wasn't just but yes, having and the basketball team was one of the worst in the country, but it didn't matter because we had the Division I basketball team to cover, and I loved covering, and it was at the Curry Hicks cage. So yeah, I liked having the experience of having everything, having a radio station, having a Division I basketball and football team, and all these other great teams to cover. So it really did. It was a perfect laboratory for a person like me.
And coming back now, what have you seen that's changed? Do you see anything that surprises you or pleases you, anything like that?
Oh, I mean, this building is an amazing building. To have a journalism, a sports journalism concentration and major, and some of the people up here, it's a great experience. I hope you take full advantage.
Absolutely. We try to with things like this. We get to sit down with accomplished people like yourself, alums. So this is great.
No, I worked with most of the great sports announcers over the years, and I was telling my son, who's a high school junior, I worked with Marv Albert for many years, the voice of the NBA, and his director, Marv called me Mr. Stats, but he called Howie Singer the electronic wizard. Well, Howie Singer and I did a sports talk show at WMUA. Howie Singer graduated a year or two ahead of me, and went on. He's directing Knick games for MSG Network, and for many years, and for NBC during the Olympics and many things. So there's a lot of us who came from this same system and keep in touch over the years and have done very, very well.
And you mentioned some of these huge names, OnAir Talents that you've worked with. Who are some of the, or what, can you name me like a classic Vin Scully story that you have or anything like that?
I probably can name you some classic Vin Scully stories. He just retired last year after 67 years. And the last few years, I would always make sure I would go out to Dodger Stadium to pay a pilgrimage, to pay a visit to Vin, who's terrific to me and
He's a legend.
And a legend. And I asked him once, Vin, of all the things since you started in 1950, of all the advances in technology, what's been the greatest asset to you in terms of technology? And he said, the yellow highlighter. I go, the yellow highlighter, not the computer? Because the yellow highlighter, think of it, when you get older and you can't read the font, and he would be able to highlight just what he needs.
That's classic.
And so that was a classic Vin. But it takes a strong man to. I traveled around the world doing sporting events for maybe 25 years. It takes a strong man. Vin into his 80s last year, and I give him all the credit in the world, and just a legend. But I worked with Bob Costas for 30 years and Marv Albert, and I've worked with Brent Musburger and Matt Vescursion and and so many others.
That's awesome. That's a dream come true.
I know.
And so you mentioned kind of the transition between your researchers or yourself doing stats and getting it on air. I feel like when I watch a game, I'm like looking at someone or looking at a play that just happened. I'm wondering about a stat, and then seconds later, it's there. It's like right on screen. What's the travel time, say, from researcher to on-air talent to my TV?
Well, the key is preparation. So if you prepare for everything and you have everything, and now with the computer, it's so easy to look up things, but we know instantly if what a pitcher-batter matchup is in their career, what John Lester does in his career against Mookie Betts, his former, whatever it is. And if something happens, we can look it up and call it up instantly. And now announcers have smartphones or computers with them where they can look things up, and the press notes that are done by the media relations department. But the graphics people, everything is, there's so much built before a game. And so that when things happen, most of this is not used. Most of the preparation and research is not used for a live sporting event, but you have to build it in case it happens. And trust me, when you're working a live sporting event, and it's a Super Bowl and the score is 28-3, you know what the greatest comebacks in Super Bowl history is. You know what the greatest comebacks in any NFL game has been. You know all of that stuff, and it's just ready. And most of the time, it goes for naught. It goes, but when it happens right, you look so smart, and you look and you answer questions, that people are wondering, that smart sports fans are wondering while they're watching a game. What am I seeing? Has this ever happened before? How unique is this? You mentioned David Ortiz. It's what we answer the questions that people are asking, that people want to know.
And I know that NBC did cover the Super Bowl in the past years. Are you planning to head to another Super Bowl very soon with NBC?
Yeah, I still have an association. I'm an editorial consultant on Football Night in America. I've worked with Tony Dungy and Rodney Harrison for their entire broadcasting careers. It's one of the great, and Dan Patrick, although in regards to Dungy and Harrison, it's their entirety of their broadcasting careers, and it's a great joy. And NBC has the Super Bowl coming up it'll be in Minnesota, which is a great place. I did a baseball all-star game there a few years ago, so I'm looking forward to it. All
right, that's all I have for you. I thank you very much for sitting down with us, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.